I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where we cover some of the most scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up right here in Northwest Florida and beyond, because there's no boundaries on crazy or weird crimes. So joining me to talk about these what the feezy stories, as usual, is Pam Hill. She's a pharmacist and a victim's advocate. She's experienced violent crime in her own family and brings her own personal perspective to a lot of these cases that we talk about. This one is particularly sad. I kind of had to steel myself thinking of this particular topic, but this is a sad one. It involves the death of a 7-month-old baby, and her babysitter. This child's babysitter was tried for basically overdosing this baby on Benadryl. So we're calling this segment Benadryl, Babysitter, and Breast Milk. What happened to baby Abby Lobisch? So this story centers around a case that happened in Hawaii. The 40-year-old woman, the babysitter, ran an unlicensed daycare at an Army-managed complex there in Hawaii. She was charged with manslaughter when they determined that it was antihistamine poisoning that caused this 7-month-old baby's death. But there's just a lot to this case, y'all. And Pam's been following it closely. It's a new one. The jury, in fact, just delivered a verdict, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But this babysitter's name is Dixie Denise Villa. And like I said, she was arrested and charged with manslaughter, tried for that crime. But let's talk about some of the details that the jury heard, Pam, in this sort of convoluted and interesting case. There's a lot of issues, I feel like, that this case has brought up.
Right. Dixie Denise Villa is, like you said, the babysitter. The mother of the baby, her name is Anna Lobisch, and the baby girl's name is Abigail Lobisch.
Okay.
So that's who we've got here. Dixie Denise she's a Navy wife. She had been running a daycare sort of like out of her home. And she had
unlicensed, I guess.
But
I think that was common because there's just not enough daycare options.
Right. Because sometimes with groups like that are congregated around one place, you got to have somebody's got to take care of your kids.
That's right.
Some people have to go to work. And
yeah, everywhere I've ever worked, usually, like I've worked with somebody that's had a child and they find someone to watch their children during the day while they're working. And sometimes it's other families that are in the neighborhood. Maybe they have a family member themselves, or they have a neighbor that stays home to take care of their own kids. So you just find it more convenient to go ahead and pay them to do childcare for you as well.
Right. Or sometimes they're like, I'm doing you a favor, you'll do me a favor. It goes back and forth. So it was that kind of situation.
Okay.
But Dixie Denise had been written up before for unlicensed daycare, and they had seen some kids playing in the backyard that were unsupervised, and neighbors are going to tell on each other. You know, there was a lot of that. But Anna Lobisch, she was in a relationship that was kind of tumultuous. So she had asked Dixie to take care of her daughter and her son, Zachariah. Zachariah was 2. So she's got a 7-month-old and a 2-year-old.
And then she has her own children.
Yeah, Dixie Denise has 2 in that area, right around 3 or 4 at the time of this.
And then several teenage daughters as well.
Right. And this was around 2019 is when this happened. So it's been a while.
Right before COVID.
Exactly. So and they even had a teenage friend over there. So there's a lot of fracas going on in the house.
A lot of people in and out, it sounds like.
And she had taken them to the beach or the water. They'd had a fun day anyway.
Yes.
There. And so they had gone there and they got sunburned. So she had put sunscreen on all of them.
Or lotion to help with sunburn. Yes.
So the reason I'm saying that, because it could be important later to me. Because this case fascinates me because
especially
it's
as a pharmacist, yes.
About medication. And it fascinates me as like, do we still not know what happened type of thing. So for
I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either.
That's why it's so interesting to hear what the jury heard.
Right, exactly. So we've got the mother and the 7-month-old baby, so she's still breastfeeding. And the mother is allergic to Benadryl. Anna Lobisch is allergic to Benadryl.
Okay.
And she had been nursing the baby up to this point. And so she sent breast milk when she would send the baby over to Dixie Denise's house. I don't know why I keep saying Dixie Denise, but that's what they call
It's
her.
fun. It rolls right off the tongue.
Right, right. So there, we've got us a little perfect storm brewing there.
Mm-hmm.
Dixie Denise was tired this day after she had taken care of 3 teenagers, 4 under 5 or 5 years old. So she gave 2 of them iPads, and I think Zachariah wanted an iPad. But Abby, she can't do an iPad. She's 7 months old. So the kids were kind of getting on her nerves, especially the teenagers. They were kind of driving her crazy. And she really did not want to babysit Anna's children this particular day, but she went ahead because Anna had told her that she had gotten a fight with her husband James because he'd found out she was pregnant on, I don't know if it was his or someone else's. Anyway, that upset him. So she said, I just need a break. Plus, I've got some classes that I'm taking. And so what they found out later, it wasn't school classes per se. It was a kickboxing class and another class for this, that, and the other. She did have school at that time, but she was meeting a man.
So she just had an ulterior motive.
Yeah,
she wasn't
definitely.
being honest about it.
Right. And Dixie Denise wasn't being honest with her either, like saying, I can't. You know, sometimes we need to tell people what our limitations are.
Yes.
Because look at this. She could have had that uncomfortable conversation in the beginning, and we wouldn't be here today with this.
That's exactly right. I think about that with a lot of these stories that we cover, including even just minor non-criminal incidents, if you will, in my own life. But I've certainly struggled with people pleasing, and you end up agreeing to a lot of different things that you didn't necessarily want to do. Nothing horrible, but just like, okay, in my mind, I thought it was going to go a different way. But it
Right.
didn't. Yeah.
Right. Or it was just easier to give in there.
Exactly.
And then you're going to pay for it. You have to just be honest and have these honest conversations. So they have this date, 2/24/2019. That's the day that they found Abigail. She had passed away. Her little skin was blotchy. She was laying face down.
Cold to the
touch. And so Dixie Denise texts Anna, the mother, and goes, come now, please, at 8:32 that morning. So she heads over that way. Well, the police, when they come in, they're asking questions and stuff, but they're not necessarily, this about medicine is what fascinates me. This Benadryl for a 7-month-old baby would have had to be given most likely orally, in liquid, which that would have been hard to do at 7 months old. And by the way, Benadryl is not recommended for children under 2, and it's also not recommended for children under 6 without consulting your pediatrician.
So they don't really know how the baby ingested the Benadryl?
They don't know how it happened. We don't know who, what, how, because the mother was breastfeeding, and the mother goes, oh, yeah, let me remember to tell somebody. I took some Tylenol PM. Now, that has Benadryl in it.
And whatever the mother eats and ingests, that comes out in the baby's milk.
It can go across.
In the breast milk.
Right. But it's not to any great extent with diphenhydramine and breastfeeding, but we don't know how often or whatever. There's a lot of variables in this. But she just said she was allergic to Benadryl, the mother did. So how could she take this Tylenol PM that has Benadryl in it?
So is it confirmed that she's actually allergic to Benadryl?
See, they didn't exactly confirm that either.
Gotcha.
And that's where people sometimes say, I'm allergic, like my mom used to say, and she was a nurse. I had to get her to stop saying this. She'd say, I'm allergic to codeine. Well, no, she's not allergic to it. She doesn't tolerate it well. She throws up, and most people throw up when you take codeine or an opioid like that with nothing on your stomach or what have you. Codeine's one of the worst. Back in the day, before hydrocodone was popular and stuff, a lot of people said they were allergic to codeine. But that starts another problem because then we're thinking you're allergic to it, and we don't give you any drugs in that category. So we move you over to a category of maybe a more potent drug. So we don't know. She says she is, so we've got that.
Okay.
And then Denise has not copped to giving the baby the Benadryl. And Benadryl can come in creams, it can come in liquid, it can come in tablets, it can come in capsules. So maybe she grabbed the wrong cream when they were putting lotion or cream on kids if you keep the Benadryl around. I personally don't like the Benadryl cream because I don't think it's absorbed to any
I've
great
never
extent.
heard of it before. Yeah.
Some people use it for anti-itch, but
I've always had allergy issues, so I've always just taken a Benadryl or some sort of generic knockoff.
right. Well, it makes you sleepy and tired.
Definitely.
And if it gets too much, too potent, it can lead to seizures and toxicity and death.
Well, and I think it's interesting too. It's one of the medications that they gave your nephew Brandon there at Chattahoochee. That's you can follow some of the episodes if you're not familiar with Pam's sister's case, but they're called Mommy Killer, and her nephew was found not guilty by reason of insanity for killing his sister his mother Pam's sister Sharon Edelot. So I did think it was interesting though when we would visit him at in Chattahoochee at the Florida State Hospital that he talked about how they would give him Benadryl, and I thought, well, aside from antipsychotics and whatever other medications you're on, Benadryl would certainly keep somebody manageable and quiet.
Yeah, at least for a little while, but then the dose would have to go up and up and up. And then also with Benadryl, we have something known as anticholinergic effects, and that's a drying effect. That's the effect that we want when we've got a runny nose or watery eyes or we're itching. We want to slow things down. So anticholinergic effect with the antipsychotics my nephew was taking, that creates another perfect storm. That creates like extra dry eyes and you have constipation and you can't think well because your brain doesn't like being dried up either. I'm not saying it exactly dries
that's
up your
good.
brain.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope my brain doesn't want to be dried up. Like, listen, lady, I'm tired. I need a break.
Right. Is anticholinergic overdose is miserable is what I'm getting at, or too much of it, you just feel sluggish and icky and feel like you want to throw up, feel like you want to die if it gets to a certain point.
But I have heard of people giving Benadryl to children when they are ready for them to go to sleep, when they want them to be calm, for all the reasons that we just talked about. But I can't imagine giving it to a baby.
And not your own baby.
Certainly not.
And then they had in the past where when Dixie Denise was taking care of baby Abby, that the child was running a fever. And so she had called the mommy, and the mommy said, give her Tylenol. Well, the Tylenol, Dixie Denise sent a picture back on a text and said, is this what you mean? How much? So in the past, she had been a good steward of the baby's care. So it's just why all this is just rolling up to kind of being hard for me to think the lady would just overdose the baby. But she was frantic. She was having a bad day. The teenagers were pushing back on her.
It was a house full of children of all ages.
Yeah. And she was trying to take care of all of them and please them all. But
and certainly not intending, even if there was something that happened. But she always has maintained that she did not give that baby Benadryl at all. Certainly not orally.
Yeah. And Anna, the mother of Abby, when she was on the stand, she had said she had taken Tylenol PM. And the defense attorney asked her, said, oh, was that what you were talking about with your friend through these texts when your friend told you delete the photos of you breastfeeding and delete the text that say anything about the breast milk? So they know something's going on over there on that side.
So do you feel like that there's some indication that maybe the mother was responsible? If she was giving this baby, was she giving the baby breast milk as well? Like did her mom bottle it and give her Dixie the milk to feed the baby?
On occasion she had. And plus the baby had just been in her care the day before, the mother's care.
Gotcha.
So, and then the mother, she's not being honest about or forthcoming about anything. And the police in this case didn't go take the mother's drug history or even look to see if there was Benadryl in either house. I don't know that if someone did it in a nefarious way, if they would keep it. But I mean, if it was an accident, either way, I've got Benadryl in my house.
Sounds like there was just not a very comprehensive investigation.
Right. And the defense attorney, she had me thinking one way and the prosecution had me thinking one way. So
doing their job.
That's right. So it was an open type thing. And so her friend that told her to delete those texts and photos said, look, we got to keep the story straight. So that comes from that side. Now, nobody would be saying that to their friend if it wasn't something.
Well, you would just be devastated. And I'm trying to put myself in those shoes. But, the fact that she was trying to me to love her, she was doing all these, I'm not passing judgment, but, maybe she's hemming and hawing about telling the full story because she's got other secrets she's trying to keep hidden. But ultimately, overriding all of that, I would just probably be devastated with grief. And I'm not in that situation. So I can't even begin to decide how I would handle it or say how I would handle it. But just to pursue manslaughter charges against if there was like deliberate negligence.
Mm-hmm.
But if I push someone to take my child so I could go do whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like I would be feeling like I need to take some responsibility for that as well. Maybe it sounds to me like she's working hard to exonerate, to not have any blood on her
Mm-hmm.
hands, if you will.
She is kind of working hard at that, but I think she's working harder for the civil case that she's trying to bring
Gotcha.
against.
Okay.
Not just Dixie Denise, but the Army and the military, because now there's this big fracas going on there.
That it was an unlicensed daycare.
Right. And they're doing it under the guise of, aren't we lovely helping people that have the same problem that we have, childcare? Well, that wasn't necessarily done under the work thing. That was done under, I thought to myself, who cares why she was going somewhere? But when I found out later that the other lady had told her, I don't want to keep your kids this particular day, and she pushes, and then she throws in, my husband's beating me, I've got class, I've got this, that, and the other.
Just wants her way.
Right, and she felt sorry for her. This is where she felt sorry for her. But then again, Denise had been reprimanded for not doing things the right way with the child care thing through the military.
Right.
So they both are kind of doing screwy stuff.
Right. But that's what I thought was so interesting. And I mentioned at the beginning that I feel like this touches on some important issues. And one of those is access to adequate and safe childcare. And it's a real issue in the military. Like I mentioned in a previous episode, we've got a lot of bases around here, and there's issues with trying to find enough daycare, adequate space, for kids of all ages. And that's not just with military families. That's families across this country, probably an issue around the world. But yeah, parents can't earn a good living. They can't better their lives if they don't have safe, trusted childcare. And so it sounds like these families were sort of having to make do where there was an opportunity. That's when you have these unlicensed daycare centers pop up, whether it's military communities or other places, because people are at wit's end to try to find an option.
Or it's just somebody keeping your kids, your next door neighbor.
Right.
Like, the military has a unique problem too. I don't like to use the word problem, but a circumstances.
Issue.
Yeah, is because a lot of times they are not near family. They're in new places all the time, new friends, new schools, new everything. Nothing is easy for them. Not that it's easy for anybody, but like my sister can call me and say, hey, can you pick up Brianna when she was little, or Brianna's sick, or, something like that. And then usually the family can scurry around and find somebody to help with. So you're kind of at each other's mercy, kind of got to do what you got to do. People can't even concentrate at work when they don't have somewhere to leave their kids, or they can't go.
Right. I know. It's heartbreaking. So the baby passes from basically antihistamine overdose, and they don't test the breast milk to determine whether or not there could have been something in there when she talked about taking the Tylenol PM. Would that have been enough in there to cause the baby's demise, do you feel?
Probably not on just a certain dose or two, but maybe if it was cumulative and she's already not telling the truth about the Tylenol PM, and she's already, she basically lied on the stand. I watched her testify, and she just straight out lied on a lot of things up there.
And that brings us to basically the conclusion of the trial, and then what's happening now, because these lies that she told on the stand are now coming to light. And I think now would be a good time, if you're not familiar with this case, the jury did return a verdict, and it surprised you.
It did. I got to thinking that, okay, all these variables, they didn't even test the baby's hair, to see, they could have done a drug test on the hair and see if the baby had been given it before. And they didn't do that. So there's a lot of holes there. But yeah, the verdict came back, and I thought, oh, this lady's going to be not guilty, because the half-life of Benadryl is anywhere from 2 to 8 hours. So that means that, let's just say up at the upper end of it, after 8 hours, half of the dose is gone. Then after another 8 hours, half of that half is gone. Another 8 hours, half of that half is gone. So there's always something in the system. So I thought, they could have done a test, but they didn't. So I said, she's going to come back not guilty. Well, after 7 hours of deliberation, she came back and they said guilty of manslaughter.
Wow.
And so that is up to 20 years in jail. And I get to thinking about this. I think if she just would have told the lady, I am not free to babysit tonight, because look at all this going on here. The lady is having to sleep at people's houses, couch to couch. She's been out on a $200,000 bond. Right there when that happened, she didn't know she was going to be taken into custody that morning when that happened. And so they raised her bond to $500,000 until the sentencing, which is next year in February.
And now it sounds like the defense is getting ready to file some kind of an appeal because of the mom's lies that they discovered on the stand. And also I read where the defense says they've had another witness come forward to say that the mother had also been seeking or asked to seek mental health at the time that the baby died. So there may be some other issues. Like you said, what other secrets has she been keeping?
Right. And even if they go back and do all this, they still, this is where an investigation has to be done well. I watch a lot of trials, and especially if they have drugs in them, and I think, why don't they consult someone at the beginning when they're doing all this? Like, get the breast milk concentration, get the concentration, get a hair test, get a nail test, check the house, look for drugs, get a history, check with the doctors. I mean, none of that was done.
Well, and basically the murder weapon, if you will, the homicide weapon, if you will, was a drug. And if you don't have the source, the quote unquote smoking gun, then you do need to search and see where it could have been, what it could have been, how it could have, this baby could have been given this much. And so everything you're saying makes sense to me. This is the weapon, if you will, in this, the thing that caused the baby to die was a chemical. So where is this chemical? How is it applied? How much was given? But none of those, that could be any number of things, and they didn't really cast a very wide net.
And also, we still don't know who gave it to her. The mother's not saying she did. Dixie Denise is not saying she did.
And you have 3 teenagers in the house. There were other adults that were, or not adults, other big kids, if you will. Not to say that they did it, but there's enough for reasonable doubt, I would have thought, if I were a jury.
Definitely.
I didn't hear the case.
And mistrial. And also there are things that could happen genetically in someone's body. She's just 7 months old. We don't know what happened. Sometimes people don't metabolize certain drugs very well, or there are just so many questions. And it breaks my heart that the 7-month-old, I mean, this could have happened with the mother if it was something like that, like an accident or the breast milk or whatever. It was just unfortunate timing, or, Denise wasn't exactly a rule follower anyway. So who knows? And the teenagers were kind of mad at her that day. They even testified she was angry and, kind of
in a bad mood.
Yeah, in a bad mood and
frustrated,
trying to give them something to do, like iPads and stuff. So this case right here, it could have gone either way.
Well, we'll see if they get the mistrial.
We'll see.
We'll see how it goes. But Pam, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us to talk about this case. That is it for Benadryl, Babysitter, and Breast Milk. What happened to baby Abby Lobisch? We appreciate you joining us. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. Remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.